thing is happening. More and more people around the globe are realizing that UFO sightings are real and they're not going away. We'll take you to one of the world's leading experts in UFOs, Jaime Maussan. We traveled to Mexico and interviewed Jaime and his staff. We saw unbelievable things. We'll take you inside and show you that incredible footage. Jose Escamillo will show us what might be hidden structures on the lunar surface. We'll take you into the lab with Dr. Roger Lear and Stephen Colbert and examine evidence, physical evidence of actual UFO encounters. We'll also show you samples that we took from a sphere that supposedly fell from space and crashed into a farmer's field. At the citizens' hearing on UFO disclosure in Washington, D.C., 6 congressmen got to hear unbelievable things that are actually happening in the skies over the earth.
UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead.
We have a space force. It's in existence.
We sat down with Stephen Bassett, the organizer of the conference, and discussed it with him.
There's an extraterrestrial presence from elsewhere engaging the planet Earth.
We also talked to Chris Putman, co-author of the best-selling book, Exo-Vaticana. We sat down with Chris and asked him to explain what the Vatican relationship is with the extraterrestrial phenomena.
The data says that more people believe in ET than believe in God.
We also interviewed Dr. David Jacobs, who took us inside the alien abduction phenomena. Dr. Jacobs also weighs in on what he thinks the endgame might be to the alien abduction phenomena.
You're listening to Canary Cry Radio. Now here are your hosts, Basil and Gons.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Canary Cry Radio. Wherever you are on this planet, whether you're coming in on iTunes, on your iPhone or iPad, or maybe even Android, if you're one of those type of people. Or, if you're old school, you're just on the website, downloading it straight from your desktop. However you're doing it, thanks for listening. My name is Basil.
And this is Gons. Welcome to another episode. This is episode number 58.
58.
Ooh, and today's guest should be no stranger to anyone who listens to this show or shows like ours. He's the author of several books, including the Nephilim Trilogy, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, Alien Interviews, The Cosmic Chess Match, On the Trail of the Nephilim, and most recently, Further Evidence of Close Encounters. And he's also the producer of the Watchers DVD series, and he's the intrepid host of Acceleration Radio. It's on every week at 6 p.m. Pacific on Fringe Radio Network, and he was our guest way back on episode 11 of Canary Cry Radio, and he's back.
In the day.
Yeah, wow. He's back. Ladies and gentlemen, our gallant guest for this episode, L.A. Marzulli. L.A., how are you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
There he is. All right. Good to have you back, man. It's been a long time since we've talked to you before. That was way back in the day. We're new people now. We've grown a little bit. We've all been on our separate adventures, so we're glad to have you back on the show.
Pleasure's all mine.
All right. So let's jump into it. Now, I know that you've been going on some trips here, hunting for the Nephilim and evidence thereof. And I know, you've been all over the place. Once in a while, you even come a little bit close to certain areas of the world that are very close to me in my life. One of them being Peru. And so you went on a little adventure there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Peru is incredible. And the impetus behind that, the backstory is I was looking at I read a book by David Childress and Brian Forrester called Cranial Deformation, Elongated Skulls. And I looked up Brian on the internet, of course, and there was a bunch of YouTube videos, and he was in a place called Paracas at this little museum called the Paracas History Museum by Senior Juan. And I was just taken aback by what I was seeing and just went, oh my gosh, we've got to get down there. So I emailed Brian, and we spoke a couple of times, and we basically set up the parameters for the trip. And of course, myself and Richard Shaw went down, Ron Moorhead, Judd Burton, our archaeologist, and Joe Taylor, who's a paleontologist, although not lettered, but that's what he is, and he's amazing at it. Incredible field man, and he did all the casting that we did down there. What we saw was impetus for, or became, Watcher 6, The Hidden Cosmic War, The Secret Cosmic War, and of course the book that accompanies it, On the Trail of the Nephilim, which is an oversized book. It's 8 by 11, and it's got over 120 full color photos in it. And the reason why I did that is I wanted to really give people a feel for what was down there, what they were looking at, what they were seeing.
Right.
And that was really important to try to convey that as best as possible.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because you talk about these elongated skulls, and these are things that we've all seen pictures of, if we really get into it. And, they even make their feature in some recent films and things like that. And, a lot of times you look at these and if you're trying to be reasonable, you like to believe that they're real and that they're genuine, authentic, elongated skulls. But, if you're not there to see them, you really can't make a good judgment. So that's what you did. You went down there and took a look.
Well, we did more than took a look. We actually took some hair samples. We're going back down again fairly soon. And when we go back down, this time we'll have 2 archaeologists with us. And hopefully we'll be in conjunction with a Peruvian archaeologist, where we'll be able to take extensive DNA samples. We need to do that. We need to have a trail of evidence. Multiple DNA samples, because we want to really nail this thing down. We really want to nail it down. We want to find out what it is we're looking at. Hopefully we'll be able to do or release the findings with a peer review paper for those people in the field, so they can examine the evidence and go from there. We think not only do we want to know, but the world needs to know. I mean, if it really is what I think it is, the entire Christian community needs to know about this. Because it's life-changing, it's game-changing, it slams Darwinism, and it shows that there's been a deliberate cover-up by the powers that be to hide the truth, not only from the American people, but from the world. I was just in a location last week, not in Peru, but in North Carolina, looking at artifacts and mounds and talking to people. And, of course, the trail is very old, because those areas had been already sort of probed before, and it's very much sanitized. What I mean by that, the information is pretty much controlled. It's difficult to get information about certain artifacts, or what happened to this mound. Or for instance, I'm trying to find out about the ground penetrating radar test that was done a few years ago. And we'll see. Hopefully, I'll be able to get a copy of that and see what they looked at this one mound in a place called Nikwasi. We found this very interesting artifact that came out of Nikwasi in the 1940 flood, which flooded the entire town of Franklin, North Carolina. Very small figurine, about 4 to 5 inches tall. And I sent that off to our 2 archaeologists without really telling them where it's from. I don't know whether they're going to listen to this program or not, but if they do, then I've given it away, but hopefully they won't. and they'll just look at this artifact and have to tell me what they think it might be. So that'll be sort of interesting.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
But in Peru, not only the skulls, but in conjunction with the skulls, there's architecture there that just defies anything that archaeologists, let me back up. When you take an archaeologist to Cusco and show him specifically a place called Sacsayhuaman right outside of Cusco, it's about 12,000 feet above sea level. There are giant megalithic rocks with polygonal size. Now, if you're a skeptic, well, there's got to be some scientific way to do this. Okay, fine. There is science behind it. We get that. But I've learned with skeptics that no matter what you say, if you're dealing with the supernatural, they won't even listen to you, no matter how much proof you show. I'm a frank supernaturalist. I will tip my hand. I believe in the things that the Bible talks about, like virgin births, floating axe heads, talking donkeys, 2 gold coins appearing from the fish's mouth, a staff that's thrown down and becomes a snake, a man who's swallowed by a whale and then regurgitated 3 days later. I mean, these are the kind of stories that we listen to. They all point to the supernatural. And we also know that angelic beings have visited this planet. And I'm not talking ancient aliens and ancient astronauts. I'm talking about the angels of God, both the good and the fallen. We know from Genesis 6, it tells us very specifically that the fallen angels came to earth, the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, came to earth, and they had coitus, they had sex with the women. There's no other way around that. I mean, we can tap dance around that scripture, and, good luck with that. Let me know how that works out for you. But the bottom line is, it didn't only happen once, it happened and also afterwards. The text is extremely clear. And it says, when the sons of God saw the daughters of men and had coitus, went into them, had sex with them. And, there's lots of theories going around about, well, there's only one incursion. And I just think that's a very truncated view, an incredibly dangerous view, because what it does is it puts boundaries on this thing that are man-made. There's no boundaries on this thing anywhere in Scripture. I mean, in other words, the burden of proof should be on the people that are promulgating a theory that somehow there's only one incursion. There's no boundaries there. And in fact, it's exactly the opposite. We read in Scripture that it says, and also afterwards, when the sons of God, the fallen angels, saw the daughters of men and went into them, and also afterwards. Well, if we're talking about Genesis 6, why would also afterward pertain to that time? When also afterward goes right to Numbers 13:33, the promised land, the Levant, where we see the Nephilim are in the land. I mean, it's right there. It's glaring. Right. It's screaming at us. Right. And the theory that we're working on, and it's a theory. I've been accused of speculating. Well, pardon me, but I assume that a theory is speculation in its pure sense of the word. If you have a theory, you're speculating this could be true. It's based on some of the evidence, and you begin to follow evidence. And as we progress, we go where the evidence leads us. And if we're wrong, we say we're wrong. But if we're right, we say that we're right. Our theory is this, that when Joshua and Caleb went into the promised land, the Levant, there were about 15 to 20 different tribes of Nephilim in the land. No one disputes that. The Zanzamim, the Imams, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, all of these are Nephilim tribes. And we find out that some of these Nephilim tribes have different genetic characteristics, which are actually found in their name. For instance, the long necks. So as Joshua and Caleb go in, they're slaughtering everything. And if we don't plug in the Nephilim there, then we've got this capricious, genocidal, crazy God who wants to slaughter everybody in there. And favor one tribe over another. Well, that contradicts Scripture, where he says, I'm a respecter. I'm not a respecter of persons. In other words, and we know that from the New Testament. God's not a respecter of persons. Reigns on the just and the unjust alike. Talks about that. So all of a sudden, Israel was chosen. I get that. They are the chosen people, and he deals with them in ways that are just incredible. But we're also grafted in the church. I'm sort of skipping around, but getting back to the thrust of this, there's a mandate that goes out from this loving God, who's the same yesterday, today, and today, to slaughter everyone in the Levant. Slaughter men, women, children, kill all the animals, burn everything. Well, there's no excuse for that. And there's no other way around that. Oh, they must have been grievous sinners. Are you kidding me? I mean, the junk that's going on today, come on. What we see, and the text is very clear about it, we see that the Nephilim are there. In my book, The Cosmic Chess Match, I get into this big time and talk about why the Nephilim are there to begin with, because they know that Most High God is going to bring the children of Israel into this land. He's got a plan, and that plan centers around Jerusalem. And isn't it interesting, right now Jerusalem is a stumbling block to all countries all over the world. The theory is this, that the Nephilim see that they're being slaughtered, and some of them flee northward into Europe. Others get on boats and go across the Atlantic Ocean and land in South America, and the rest is history. They begin to set up shop, as it were. Fallen angelic hosts are seen. For instance, we know in Paracas, Peru, there's a legend of the Paracas flying men. I have a picture of this taken from a textile, which is at least a couple thousand years old. I mean, it's never been tested, but it's at least 1,000 years old, and more likely closer to 2,000 years old. And this flying man, as the legend goes, flying around Paracas, and he's holding a skull and licking it. Now, that doesn't sound like, Winnie the Pooh bedtime stories to me. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, This is about as nasty as you can get.
Right. Now, here's a question for you. Okay, so now that we're back in Peru here, and we'll talk specifically about these elongated skulls, and you said you had taken samples to get DNA tests. Now, here's my question is, A, these things are so strange and so unique that they obviously need to be taken a look at. Why hasn't anybody else done, or has anybody else done DNA testing, or has anybody else sort of looked into this? And then on top of that, what exactly do you expect to find when looking at a DNA structure? What is there anything that you can actually take a look at after the test has been done and you can look at the DNA? What will that tell you exactly?
Well, let me back up. We took hair samples. We did not take DNA samples yet.
Okay. All right.
I did have the DNA tested from the hair, and they were not able to extract any DNA from the hair. But we took the DNA, or we took the hair sample that we got from Peru, and we took it to a laboratory and did a test that is known as Raman spectroscopy. And we had 4 hair samples that we used. Number 1 was a normal human hair, not dyed. Number 2 was a human hair that was dyed. Number 3, the red hair from Paracas. And number 4, this is all going to be on Watchers 8, by the way, and also in On Betrayal Volume 2. The 4th hair was a hair that it was taken from a man who was abducted and forced to have sex with a female hybrid. And their hair was almost white, almost transparent looking. So we took all those hairs and put them under Raman spectroscopy. The first hair, the human hair, the arc, and Raman spectroscopy is a machine that tells you what the molecular structure looks like and charts it on a graph. Very scientific instrument. So the human hair starts off about midway up the graph on the left-hand side, makes a nice little arc and disappears. The human hair that's been dyed starts about the same place but goes straight up, or an arc from left to right and up through the top of the graph. Here's where it got really interesting. The red hair from Paracas, which is at least 2,000 years old, and the white hair from the hybrid creature that this man had sex with, the slopes, which is what the line looks like on the graph, it's called a slope. The slopes tracked each other. Every little jog, every tittle, every nuance, almost exactly. And the guy that did the test fell out of his chair. It's like, whoa, what is this? That shouldn't be. And what we believe, again, it's a hypothesis. We're not saying for sure because we don't have all the evidence. But what it does do is it seems to point a connection between what happened thousands of years ago in antiquity and the abduction phenomenon, which of course is happening in modernity. And I've summed it up this way. There seems to be an outside agency that is experimenting with the human genome. That fits our hypothesis. So when we go back down there and we get good DNA samples, numerous from a variety of samples, what we're expecting, more than likely, the mitochondrial DNA will show human. That's what we think. That's the female side, the mother's side. The mitochondrial DNA will show human base pairs. There may be some oddities in that, which will, we don't know. But we think that the nuclear DNA won't match anything at all. And people will just sit there, the DNA guys will just sit there and scratch their heads and go, we have no idea what we're looking at. We've never seen anything like this. It may even have a third strand for all we know. I mean, we don't know. According to Brian Forrester, no one has done testing on these since 1928. Now, with that in mind, other people have gone down ahead of us, Lloyd Pye for one, and they've done some DNA testing on one of the skulls, and we're not sure which one it is. We're trying to find out. And apparently the mitochondrial DNA had some very, very interesting anomalies to it. And here's the deal with all this. The skeptic will look at the thing and say, oh, the evidence wasn't done the right way. I mean, it's just, I already know what it's going to be like, no matter how much information we get. And look, we don't know what the DNA testing will say. I mean, I could be wrong. Oh, guess what? It's, we found the mitochondrial DNA, we found the nuclear DNA, everything's fine, and it was just all cradle headboarding. But we don't think it is because, again, these skulls, many of them were cradle headboarding. That's when they take material, the material, and they wrap it around an infant's head, and they bind the head, and it's bound, and as it grows, it shapes the head. Well, we saw that, and we got pretty good at telling which ones were which. But the ones that were authentic, and let me back up, it also begs the question, why is someone doing this to begin with?
Right.
Why is someone binding the heads of their infants? What are they trying to emulate? The ones that we saw that were real, we believe, of course, only had one parietal plate. And I'm just going to do this real quick for you guys.
Sure.
But I've got it right here, and I'm on camera, just so you can see what this looks like. This is the skull that we did from Paracas.
Okay.
Right here. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay. There's the skull. It's a female. We believe it's a female skull. And did it just freeze? There we go. And here's a side shot of it. All right. A normal human skull should have this. And notice the size of the forehead here. And then notice this ridge right there. Very strange. So this is the frontal plate, and it should have let me back up. The frontal plate, it should have two parietal plates with what's known as a parietal suture, which goes back like this. And then, of course, it has the occipital plate in the rear here. There's the occipital plate. What this skull has, as you can now plainly see, it only has one parietal plate on top. One parietal plate. There's no parietal suture which divides the two, which should be two parietal plates here. There's only one parietal. There's not even a hint of a parietal suture. And this is what we're after. And we just found it incredible that we were able to not only look at these skulls but photograph them and take casting of them. Next time we're down there, we definitely will take DNA samples. Now, this skull that I showed you, let me just put it back in its folder.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, I'm no professional, but when you take a look at that, I do have an idea of the skull structure and the fractures and the plates you're talking about. And yeah, that is definitely, for those of you who are not on video chat right now, definitely fascinating.
Well, and here's the deal. I've shown it to 4 or 5 different dentists, all who have looked at the dentition. They believe it is a female between 18 and 25 years old because they're starting to see traces of the wisdom teeth that are coming in. So the skeptics have pointed out that, well, the parietal plate should have, if maybe it's an older skull, someone in their 70s or 80s, advanced age, and the parietal suture will close. And we understand that. I've also shown it to at least a half a dozen medical doctors, one forensic anthropologist. The forensic anthropologist who saw it looked at me and said, "Where did you get this?" And that was his first question. The other medical doctors examined it. One man came on the record, but wanted to come on anonymous. And this is what you'll find: everyone's afraid of losing tenure, of being called weird, or looking at UFOs or whatever. There's always this whole ridicule. You can't speak the truth in this country anymore without the ridicule. It's just incredible. And a perfect example is this is the doctor who wrote his opinion of what the skull looked like. He says point blank, you'd be hard pressed to convince me that this was human. That's the whole point. So what's interesting too is that the Paracas people show up about 3,000 years ago in Paracas, Peru, on the coast, west coast of Peru, which fits the timeline of a conquest of Canaan. It's not exact, but it's pretty doggone close. In other words, if they flee, if the conquest of Canaan was about 3,500 years ago, these people had time to move and migrate. And that's our whole theory. And, that date of 3,000 years is really plus or minus 500 years. So, even if we find out from carbon dating, which is sort of unreliable, but even if we find out from carbon dating that it's like 32 or 300 years, 3,300 years back, whatever, that still puts it right in that timeline of the conquest of Canaan. I remember talking to Brian Forrester about this, and he told me that they did have the skulls tested. One of the skulls tested. They carbon dated it. And apparently it came back around a little over 3,000 years. And Brian was shocked. He said, well, we were figuring 10 to 12,000. I said, no, Brian, this fits our timeline perfectly. I was expecting about between 3,000 and 3,500 years, somewhere in that window of time, where these people came across and set up shop there. What's interesting is the northern counterparts, which again we believe are Nephilim tribes, arrive in Newark, Ohio, let's say, right around the same time, about 3,500 years ago. And they create these huge edifices known as the Serpent Mound, the Circle Mound, the Octagon Mound, many of the other mounds, excuse me, found throughout the Midwest. And I am on the trail on this, like you can't believe. It's all I do.
Right.
I was in North Carolina. I had several meetings. I met with a Native American war chief, which is really incredibly interesting, who told me some stories. And look, I'm sure I'm not the first white man to hear them, but a couple of them, he told me that you're the first person we've ever told this stuff to. And I was kind of blown away by that. And I was not only was I taken aback by it, but I was just overwhelmed that they would give that information to me.
Is that something that you could share? Or?
I can't yet. I've not been released to share it. But I will say this. I can say this, that it bolsters our whole theory, because these guys know what these giants were. They know what they were. They fought them. Their oral tradition talks about this, and it's just absolutely fascinating. And if I am released, of course, it'll all be in volume 2. I mean, that's a great sales pitch. You're saying, well, that's a great way to make people buy the book. I get it, but it is true. I am not at liberty to release this publicly yet until I'm told. I will say this, that the email I got, which I found very interesting, their tribes talk about the days of fire. And they believe the days of fire are coming. And I'm not sure what that means. But within 24 hours after receiving that email, someone sent me another email. There was no collusion between these two people, talking about A.A. Allen's, who was a prophet in the 50s, who was called a false prophet because of this prophecy. He had a waking vision on top of the Empire State Building. What he saw shocked him. He saw the entire country of the United States of America under attack and nuclear bombs going off. Days of fire, anyone? The third confirmation to that, which blew me away, this is all last week and just slightly the week before. You may remember that last week there was a picture of the United States, a map of the United States, showing where the Chinese were going to bomb for us with nukes from their nuclear submarines. That was released into the public mainstream by the mainstream media, news stream by the mainstream media last week, and I was just taken aback. So within a span of less than 48, 72 hours, right around that time, I had like 3 days of fire. Oh my gosh, the Chinese have a map of the United States and where they're going to shoot their nukes. You got to be kidding me.
Right.
I found that really incredibly interesting. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Right.
But with that in mind, that's why I was told that some of these. That's why I was told the stories I was told, and we're hoping that this particular war chief will be part of our company, and he's sort of alluded to that he would do that. But we'll see what happens. That would just certainly be wonderful for us if it happened.
Yeah. Now you said earlier that one of the hair samples that you compared with was a white hair that came from a hybrid that a man allegedly was raped by or something.
Yeah, he was forced to have sex with her.
Right. Now my question is, are these genetically engineered beings, or are they just descendants of the fallen angels and then the Nephilim, or what are they trying to do here? What's the end game for the dark side? I mean, what are they trying to do? Yeah. And
this is where we all leave. We're not in Kansas anymore time. And can I prove it? No, I can't. And the skeptics look at all this stuff and have a field day with it. But all I know is that after speaking to numerous abductees, and some of these people are just absolutely traumatized like you can't believe, that I believe the phenomenon is real. What's happening, Chuck Missler was weighed in on this, and he states, sort of matter of factly, Satan is outnumbered 2-1, and he is, and he's building an army. And it's like the days of Noah, where the Nephilim are back, but it's different. Satan is trying to create man in his own image. He's a copycatter. That's what he does. And he's trying to create mankind in his own image. So there's genetic manipulation constantly going on, has been going on. I think Paracas and other sites are an example of that, a litany, if you will, of this sort of genetic manipulation that has gone on for millennia, literally for millennia. So these hybrid creatures that we see or that we hear reports of, this one looked more alien than it did a human. What we're getting from those who are contactees is that the hybrids now look and can pass as humans. That's what we're hearing. Can I vet that? No, I can't. But what's interesting, if a church sits here and talks about God and everything else and looks at all this and will point a finger of accusation at me, well, prove that Jesus existed. Well, you really can't. You've got some evidence like the Shroud of Turin, but even that is controversial, right? I believe the Shroud of Turin is real, but many people in the Christian community do not believe the Shroud of Turin is real. So with that in mind, you say, well, what kind of proof do you have? Well, this is where it gets back into the implants. And we have taken, or Dr. Leroy, I should say, has removed 16 implants. And in Watcher 7, we have a man who contacted us who claimed he had an implant, and we were probably some of the first people he ever told about his early abduction experiences when he was 5 years old, as he was being taken. And we took him into Dr. Lear's office, and there we sat him down and we got him an x-ray, and lo and behold, there's the implant. We showed that in the film, and we did a CAT scan with him and took the CAT scan back and at Dr. Lear's office, and guess what? There's something there. So the next thing we're going to do, in conjunction with Jaime Maussan, who we also interviewed for Watchers 7. Jaime is a world-renowned UFO investigator, has a 2-hour show every week in Mexico, seen by more than 4 million people. It's the longest running UFO show. Jaime gave us tons, like terabytes of UFO footage, and some of that, of course, we show in Watcher 7. Just phenomenal guy, phenomenal stuff. Well, Jaime's going to contribute. So in Watchers 8, we're going into the operating theater, and we're going to remove this thing, and at the same day go down to SEAL Lab and look at it under a scanning electron microscope. We're also trying to get an oscilloscope before we take this thing out to see if the frequency that it's giving off has a square wave. If it does, then it might point to, again, validate our theory that the frequency that it's giving out is in fact a clock speed. We believe that these chips are in fact supercomputers which are changing the host's DNA. They are prototypes of something which is coming. And they're physical. I've held them in my hand. I've looked at them under a scanning electron microscope. They are the real deal. And these people who are being abducted talk about these chips. I'll tell you something really weird, and I can't really get into it because I haven't released it. This is from Jaime Maussan. He hasn't released us to divulge this yet, but I'll just say it in a very nondescript way. When we were in Jaime's office, looked at something, and that's all I can tell you about it. And this something that day was taken out of Jaime's office and went through an x-ray procedure. And we saw the x-rays from this something. And what was interesting is the x-rays had 6 implants in this thing. The thing was dead.
Wow.
But it had 6 implants. Okay? So we know that something is going on with the implants. I had someone that called me over the weekend that's got implants in them. And look, if you're hearing this and you're paranoid about the implants, the first thing you do is you just go get an x-ray and find out if there's anything there. If you think there's one in your arm, fine. Walk in and say, doctor, when I was a kid, I had a childhood injury, and I think I got some glass or metal in my arm. It's kind of bugging me. Can we just take a look at it? And, they'll do an x-ray. They're really cheap to do. And if there's anything there, it's going to show up. And guess what? If there's nothing there, you go home free.
Now, what if someone actually, was concerned about that? Would they know if they had it or not? Because I know there's been some talks about, well, people are going to get, especially concerning the mark of the beast, that people are going to get marked without their knowledge and things like that. But in terms of, let's say, even though this might not be the actual mark of the beast, even though it might be like a prototype, if somebody didn't know that they had some sort of chip in them. Do these people usually know, or is there any way we can? I mean, I don't want to be paranoid, but
no. And this is what's interesting about this. People know that they've been chipped.
Okay.
And that's why they call. That's why this guy wants it out. That's why there's a man and a woman that I know. They don't know each other, but they both came to me separately, no collusion between them. Really bizarre story. They knew, they felt like they had missing time. They felt they had been abducted. They felt that there was an implant in their forehead. Both of them, not on the same day, but both of them went into the bathroom, took a razor blade, and cut the thing out themselves.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy stuff. So, look, something is going on. And again, we are the people that believe in virgin births, floating axe heads, talking donkeys, men that walk on water that's changed to wine, the deaf see, the blind hear, angels that strike out 185,000 Syrians, angels that fly over and kill the firstborn of the Egyptians, magicians that do plagues, Moses' staff that becomes a serpent. I mean, come on. I mean, these are everything I just mentioned is absolutely supernatural stuff. Everything. So
right.
Why is it that we have this truncated view with the enemy when in 2 Thessalonians we are warned, in fact, that Satan will come with all signs and lying wonders? Well, what we're looking at this stuff, these are lying wonders. These are false signs. It's here. It's already manifesting. And that's what the church and the skeptics don't understand. And then, of course, then you get a colleague of mine, Doug Woodward, and I were talking about this and sort of chortling about it. And I've dealt with this not nearly as much as Russ Dizdar have and other people who are in the deliverance ministry. But, you get someone that's got a familiar spirit in them or on them, or that's possessed. I don't mean totally possessed, but possessed. Okay. And things get very interesting very quickly. And that will certainly make a believer out of pretty much any skeptic. And in fact, a skeptic wouldn't know what to do with it. Go to a psychiatrist and get some meds type of thing.
Right.
And that's not going to cut it. And, we deal with some of it behind the scenes, certainly here at what I do. Not a lot of it, but we do get some of it. And depending on what it is, sometimes we are able to help. Other times we don't have the resources and the ability to help. The people are in other states, and it's very difficult. Oftentimes, I can pray over the phone, and when we work, our protocol is we don't. If it's a woman, then my wife is with me on the phone. We always go in pairs of two. That we feel is a biblical mandate. We try to make sure someone is on the other end of the phone with the person that we're trying to deliver from a demonic entity or whatever, and we've had good success. But then there are people that don't want the thing to leave, and I really mean that sincerely. There are people that we have tried to get it out of them, and they don't want it out. And there's nothing you can do because they have a legal right to be there. Now, why am I telling you all this, and how does it relate to Peru? Well, all that I just told you about a supernatural dynamic. And unless we understand and begin to embrace the supernatural and understand that what the Bible is, in my opinion, the Bible just means book. What it really is a guidebook to the supernatural. I was at the Paradigm Symposium up in Minnesota about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I was speaking to all New Agers. So it was a very, very difficult weekend, very intense weekend. A lot of resistance, but that's another story. And also some guy wrote a nasty little hit piece on me, but that goes with the territory too.
Right.
And, you just got to take it. And that's just how life is.
Yeah.
But, I was up there and talking about all this to people and just what can happen and the idea of a supernatural. And, it's like, the people up there have a conception of who Jesus is or who they think he is. And the moment you mention the J word, the light switch just goes off. People don't even want to listen to it.
Right.
But what they don't understand is that there's this supernatural war that's taking place, and Yeshua, Jesus, is the most incredible person that's ever come on this planet. And he warns us it would be like the days of Noah when he comes back. I mean, why would, if he has got the whole Tanakh to point to, and he points to that one passage, he goes, it's going to be like the days of Noah, which immediately begs the question, what differentiates the days of Noah? And of course, it is the presence of the fallen angels. So, I'm there addressing all these, a total New Age crowd and resistance and stuff. And what they don't get is that this deception, and the church doesn't get it either, that when this deception finally comes, it's too late. The skeptics will go, oh my gosh, it's real. Well, that, we've been trying to warn you, and they'll have their, come to Jesus aha moment at that point. But this thing is so overwhelming. I can't stress it enough. I haven't seen the future. I have not seen an awaking vision, anything like that. But the Lord I felt that the Most High God's Spirit, the Spirit of a living God, has impressed upon me through mental images that it is absolutely game-changing, overwhelming, game-changingly overwhelming. That's what it is when they show up. And in Watcher 7, we have a clip from the Washington disclosure hearing several months ago in Washington D.C. The Disclosure Project, it was called, in Washington D.C. And we've got a shot we were able to use as much as we wanted from that because again we interviewed Stephen Bassett, who was the person who put the Disclosure Project on, and we got all the footage. Well, Paul Hellyer, I'm sure you guys have seen this, because I know how you are, and you're right up on your research, and I applaud you for that. But Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister from Canada, on mic in front of hundreds of people and the panel of senators and everything, says UFOs. This is what Paul Hellyer says: UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. Yeah. Now, you can't say it any clearer than that. And state it more emphatically. And he's not crazy, and they are real, and they are flying overhead. In fact, there's a statement that I always use: UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. Well, burgeoning might be an understatement because it's gone from 1,000 a month, which is about 6 months ago, to over 2,000 now a month, and it's been running about 2,000 for the last 3 months. 2,000 sightings worldwide. Wow. 2,000 sightings worldwide,
and those are the ones reported, right? Yeah,
exactly.
I know that it seems like there's a kind of a breakdown between, because there's some people that say that, some of the UFO phenomenon and stuff, it's just spiritual, it's not physical. But it seems like there is, when you say supernatural, we're talking about both, right? It's a spiritual aspect, but of course there's also a physical side to it. Now, we just did an episode a couple episodes ago, and we speculated about the moon. I mean, all the conspiracies regarding the moon landing, and when we talked about unicorns on the moon, we went everywhere. You spoke to Jose Escamilla, who apparently, in Watcher 7, who apparently showed you some footage of what looks like some stuff on the moon. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a crater there called Aristarchus, and it seems to be self-illuminating. And there's also an object which he was able to find, which it looked like there's something there that now it might be a trick of a light. We don't know, but it looks it very suspicious to me. It looks like, oh my gosh, there's something there. The fact that crater illumines itself, NASA scientists say it just reflects the light, but it looks like it's illumining not only itself but the surrounding area. There was one of the guys, this ties back into the moon thing, I forget his name. He was on the panel, a former senator, congressman, at the citizens hearing for disclosure, and he said, he sort of blurted out, and you could see he was nervous when he said it. He said, we have a space fleet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if that's true, then it's like, oh my gosh. And it's like, think about this. When the way things work, believe it or not, is they condition everybody through the cinema. Because you can reach millions and millions of people through entertainment. And they just sit there. Next time you're in a movie theater, I challenge you, audience, to look around you just break out of the film for a second and look around. Everyone is absolutely transfixed, hypnotized by what they are seeing.
Yeah.
They are engulfed in another reality. Well, that's where the information is disseminated. So in Transformers, not the last one, I think it's, well, whichever one it is, the one where they go to the moon and they find a large ship and this whole deal. Well, how do we know that that's not based in reality?
Right.
And I realized, oh, that's just ridiculous. Well, what, fine, call it what you want. I'm not going to say that didn't happen. I don't know whether it did happen. I can't vet that, obviously. I just find it really curious that NASA is redacting photographs from the lunar surface. Jose's finding stuff. Why does NASA always publish the photographs in black and white when they're not black and white? The moon is not colorless. The moon has this color to it. It does. And we talk about that in Watcher 7. So, look, guys, something's going on. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and especially if we consider, in December, a month from when we're recording this, Richard Branson's taking, a whole flight of people for, $250,000 a seat out into space in his little Virgin Galactic shuttle thing. So, I mean, I think people's interest in space is, going to be revitalized. And I think it's all part of the plan to get people to start, accepting this idea that, hey, we're out in space already and that sort of thing. And they wouldn't be doing stuff like that, space tours for the common person, even though it costs $250,000. I don't think they'd be doing that unless, there's some infrastructure there that's already placed.
$250,000 seems cheap to me. I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
Would you do it, LA? Would you go up there for, if, maybe not $250,000, but, the space, the galactic trip there?
I'll take that as a yes.
One of the people you spoke with in Watchers 7 was also David Jacob, and you mentioned him earlier.
Yes.
He's done so much research on this topic. What is his, has he changed at all or have any new insight as to some of what he's finding out as far as this whole hybrid program?
Well, yeah, look, I asked him point blank, what are your feelings on this thing? He said, despair.
Oh.
His word, despair. In fact, Watcher 7 has a book called Further Evidence, which has a lot of stuff from Dr. David Jacobs in it, which is not in the film. Same thing with Chuck Missler, and that's why we did it, because we took some of the transcripts and the interviews with people that are not in part of Watcher 7. So it's the two are meant to sort of go hand in hand, but they're also standalone products. But a wealth of information. But in Further Evidence, the new book, and of course Watcher 7, it was fascinating for me to talk to Dr. Jacobs because I interviewed him a number of years ago. He was actually on my radio show several times, and felt that we had a rapport. And when we went in there, he was sort of on the mend from. He was taking some medicine. He had some side effects to it, and he had some short-term memory stuff with that. But the day that we were there, he was as sharp as a tack and just did a bang-up job, just did a fantastic job with the interview. He looks at the phenomena, and he is in despair for his lives of his children and grandchildren. He thinks that it's in wherever they're from, whoever they are. And of course, he doesn't embrace a biblical paradigm like we do. Okay. So, it's going to be a different deal. He looks at the future with despair. He thinks that these beings, wherever they are from or whoever they are, whatever they are, have nefarious means to an end, that they are just nefarious, and it's not good for the human race. And I would concur with him on that. On the other hand, you get some of the other people, specifically at the Paradigm Research or the Paradigm Symposium where I was, and some other places, and these people believe that there are space brothers and they're here to help us, and they actually created us, and now at this critical junction in history, the space brothers will be back to usher us into a time of peace, prosperity, and knowledge. Look, I'm not making this stuff up.
Right.
This is what the other side of the aisle is promulgating. What was alarming to me is the new season of Ancient Aliens. Stephen, they did a whole thing on Satan, and the bottom line is their take on Satan was, well, he's just not such a bad guy. He's just a little misunderstood. I mean, literally, that's, and I blogged on this, and of course, I got a hit piece on my blog, but that's okay. It is what it is. By a skeptic, and this skeptic thinks both Ancient Aliens and L.A. Marzulli are completely bonkers, right? But he doesn't understand things of the supernatural. The natural, look, Bible says it real clearly, with all due respect to skeptics out there, but it's true. The natural man does not understand the things of the spirit. Before I was born again 33 years ago, I had no idea the way things worked. And there are protocols in the heavenly realms, and there are protocols here. We are told if something appears to us, we are told to test the spirits. Well, there's not one New Ager I've met yet who knows how to test the spirits. And we're instructed in the guidebook of the supernatural, i.e. the Bible, to test the spirits. And there's a very simple litmus test, which you can find out what the heck you're dealing with. It's really simple. I will probably don't have time to get into that tonight, but I mean, that's something that's told to us in the Epistle of John, tells us very specifically how to test the spirit. And the difference between the Christian and the New Ager is, the New Ager just accepts everything. Because they have communication or something happens, many of them believe, oh, it's benevolent, it's good, let's just embrace it. And as Christians, we should be going, oh my gosh, I don't know, just because you're an angel of light, show me your credentials. Did Jesus come in the flesh? Of course, that's how you test whether what you're looking at. And if it's anything but yes, or if it's a tap dance, then you know that it's, I'll just say the word because it's sort of silly, it's a Decepticon. It's an intruder. It's something that you just want to break from. Right. So, look, we're headed towards something. I believe history is climactic, not cyclical. And I believe that we're headed rapidly towards a climax. And this climax, of course, was foretold in biblical texts thousands of years ago. And it's coming to pass right in front of us.
Right. Absolutely. Well, LA, this has just been a fantastic conversation. I want to thank you again for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you, guys.
Hey, so if people want to get in touch with you or your crew, or find your movies and your books and things, where can they do so?
Right now, lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net. We had our pre-sale special, which we're taking down tonight because we'll have product delivered tomorrow. We'll be shipping Watcher 7, not the book. The book won't come for another couple of weeks, but Watcher 7 is done, and we'll be shipping that out. And that's lamarzulli.net, www.lamarzulli.net.
There you go. And make sure to check that out. Daily, you blog a lot too, so there's a lot of wealth. Pretty much everything. There. Right, exactly. So there you go, folks. L.A. Marzulli. Once again, man, thanks again for coming on the show.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on. Thanks, guys.
Talk to you next time.
You got it.
So there you have it, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of Canary Cry Radio. Now, here's a request. I very often talk about iTunes, and you guys going on there doing me a personal favor, leaving a review, maybe leaving a rating of any number of stars. And here I am one more time at the end of the show to plead with you. Just, if you like this episode of the podcast, if you're into it, if it was interesting, if you think that Basil and Gons and L.A. Marzulli would make a great superhero trio team, go on to iTunes on your phone or on your iPad or on your desktop and leave us a rating and a review. And there you go. That's one way that you can really support us, and we would be so thankful, wouldn't we, Gons?
Yes, and those of you who have been leaving a message, you guys are awesome. Or not a message, a review.
Yeah. Well, we got a couple of reviews. One from Justy33 and one from Routledge something.
Yeah, I think that's Leo over there.
Right. You guys are nice. Thank you.
You guys are awesome. And also you guys who are supporting the podcast financially.
My goodness.
You guys are so special.
It's making my day over here. And if you're not, that's always a nice way to help out your podcast brethren in the time of the holidays. But I guess we can just go into straight some post-episode verbiage.
Yeah.
Ready, go.
All right, well, the views and opinions expressed by the authors and guests on this program are not necessarily those held by the hosts of Canary Cry Radio or its community.
So legal sounding.
Yeah.
All right, make sure to visit canarycryradio.com for some show notes on this episode. You got some episode archives, forums, and more.
Yeah, and you can also contact us by clicking on the contact tab or emailing us directly at canarycryradio@gmail.com.
If this episode touched your life, your worldview, or your beating little heart in any way, please consider supporting the show financially.
You can do so by visiting canarycryradio.com and clicking on the support tab. There, you can sign up for a small monthly donation.
Or if commitment's not your thing, you can leave a one-time donation in any amount.
Canary Cry Radio is and will always be free, so your support is what keeps us on the air.
Make sure to catch the next episode of canarycryradio.com, and until then, think outside the cage.
The next episode of canarycryradio.com.
Is that what I said?
Is that the name of our show now? Are we .comming the show? I mean, it's kind of a marketing thing, right?
It's kind of cool. I'll do that. Make sure to catch the next episode of Canary Cry Radio. And until then, think outside the cage. All right, well, I got some cherry pie waiting for me inside. There's actually a literal cherry pie in there. I've been thinking about this entire episode.
I kind of had a feeling you were thinking about food. Like, I can kind of sense the vibe. I don't know why.
The whole
like, even
time.
when you're like elongated skulls, I was like, you're thinking about eating something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was so happy he just wanted to go for the hour, because I'm like, that's just about as long as I can make it without going to eat that pie.
Now I want pie. Dang it, I haven't had a cherry pie in so long. Does it have like the...
It's my favorite.
Does it have the syrupy like goo?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I love
it's
that.
the gooey
So
cherry
good.
pie.
Yeah.